there's something that I saw firsthand that I believe is an issue for both major parties. We are struggling very much, particularly in these times, with the partisanship and the polarization of managing the national issues and national party issues. We should be doing things which is really to offer ourselves to help others and to ensure that people are always going to be first in your mind, and know that no matter how tough things can be, there's always going to be someone who is in more difficult circumstances. And I think that should give us pause and to think about what it is that we have in our lives. Don't focus on how many points are on the scoreboard. It actually doesn't matter to him. What he tells his team is just get a first down.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On the Fringe. This is Dave. I'm here with Gavin.
Hey.
And we have a special guest. We have Sherman Tylawsky returning to On the Fringe. Some of you guys may know this or may not know this, but Sherman ran for Congress in Nevada's 2nd District a few months ago, and we're going to be talking to him about his campaign. And Sherman, you're the first person that I've actually met in person that has ran for Congress. So awesome job from your campaign. I kind of followed it on Facebook and online. You did a really, really good job, and just kind of walk us through a little bit about why you decided to run. I mean,
sure.
It fits in. Go ahead.
First of all, Dave and Gavin, thanks so much for having me on again, and so great to talk with you again. And it's been several months, but we're sitting down having a conversation over a cup of coffee and with our mugs as well. So it's just great to chat again, and I think this is such an interesting time, really, to share about the campaign all. And as Dave mentioned, I decided to run for Congress for an open seat here in Nevada District 2. So I decided to launch a campaign for the Republican primary for the 2nd District here in the great state of Nevada, and it was an incredible experience. Although the results were not what we wanted this time, however, I took away so much, and I'm here to share just some of the things that I got to experience, I got to learn. I want to first say, before I get to the backstory of how I got to the position of the campaign, I just want to first say there's so many people who were part of this experience, and I'm not going to name certain names in the sense that I got to know some friends who ran in very, let's just say, heated races. So I just want to preface with that. Yeah. So I think it'll be, and people might know whom I'm referring to anyway if they're part of the story, but I just want to put that out there. But that, I think it goes to show how many people I got to meet and get to hear from along the way. So the backstory is that I literally was just back in Tuscaloosa. So I'm currently in Carson City. I know I'm wearing my Alabama stuff right now, but because I'm just excited for college football coming up. But I decided that I was going to just stay in Tuscaloosa for the remainder of the academic year. No big deal. That was just kind of the way it was going to be designed, and coming back in May. But I'm reading the news. It's on a Friday afternoon, slow news day, and I see the news in early February that our Congressman Mark Amodei, Republican, he's been here since 2013, I believe, he decided he was going to retire from the House. And so that will, of course, leave an open seat for 2026. And I decided right away, I just thought, gosh, this is crazy. Finally, an open seat. Like, how rare is that? And the next day, I have my weekly call with my folks, and I tell them the news. They didn't know about the news. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't know until a few days later. And I said to them, I'm going to make a run. It just came out, and my folks were probably a bit taken back. I'm like, whoa, where's this coming from? But I also knew that just as they have for my entire life, they want to support it any way they could. And I was incredibly grateful for that. And I told them that I want to do this run because the goal is to understand what a campaign is. The goal is to understand what the issues are. The goal is to do all the things that are focused on doing the right thing and trying to learn from the process. I want to say something. I mentioned the Alabama thing because I do think this is going to be a recurring theme in my sharing about the campaign, which is Coach Saban, of course, is arguably one of the greatest college football coaches ever. And I had recently just read a book about him, and he was talking about the way he generally approaches his offense. And the way he said was that they don't focus on how many points are on the scoreboard. It actually doesn't matter to him. What he tells his team is just get a first down. Get a first down. Go score, right? And so if it's 1st and 10, right, and you get sacked, now it's 2nd and 14. Okay, setback. That play is over, right? Now you got to
Mm-hmm.
focus on how do you get those 14 yards or more to get a first down. And that, I think, is the approach that I decided to take from the very beginning, which was instead of focusing on what the scoreboard is or what the polls might say or what the media might say or what so and so might say, the goal at the very beginning was how do we understand this part of the district? How do we make people feel heard? How do we portray ourselves obviously in an authentic way? The fact that we might not have had the lives that they've had or are having, but we understand and we are willing to listen. And that, I think, is the recurring strand there. And we can go in any direction you want to go in terms of parts of the campaign. But I decided that I was going to come back, and I shortened my time in Tuscaloosa. Thank goodness I had an online class that I was teaching, so I didn't have to tell somebody that it's like, sorry, I got to go. That'd be kind of weird if I just told this bunch of students, oh, see you later, sayonara. I'm going to go launch a campaign. But it was actually very easy to just work out the logistics and get the U-Haul trailer and all that. My mom even came all the way from Nevada to Alabama to help with the driving and the moving and the cleaning and whatnot. And it was really fast. Obviously, it was very emotional. And I would say that even though it was in Tuscaloosa, I felt like that was the start of that campaign mode because it was not just a departure from Tuscaloosa permanently. It was the start of now doctoral program slash running a campaign for a couple months. And it's like, okay, now it's really hitting you. And we did the drive 3.5 days. I highly recommend it. It's not easy, but you got to do those cross country drives. And we started to build those foundations of the campaign. It was actually started weeks earlier with putting together the cards, the literature, the signs, all that. There's a lot of work that gets involved. And once I got here, it was still surreal. I had to take a couple of days to just realize that we just only took 3 days to get from the eastern seaboard or eastern part of the U.S. to the west. And I decided that, okay, got to figure out what is that we need to do and move forward. So I'm going to start with that, and then we'll go to whichever direction you guys want to go to.
So I'm just going to jump in real fast and go. First of all, that does sound completely surreal, and I can't imagine the headspace you would be in teaching a class and running a campaign. But the first thing is, I just want to ask really simply, can you describe to us where is the second district of Nevada? What's it like? Who lives there? Just very break it down for us.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you asked that because I'll compare it like this. So there are congressional districts in New York City that are just a part of Manhattan. Right? We're
Hmm.
talking like a few neighborhoods because of the population density. The size of the second congressional district, if you look on a map, it is so large that it actually takes up about half of the state. So the second district covers northern Nevada and basically covers from the western side, western border, which is technically Verdi, which is a suburb of Reno, but just say Reno and Sparks, so it contains those cities, Carson City, the capital, and some other smaller towns nearby. Goes all the way across I-80, all the way to West Wendover, which is a small gaming town at the border between Nevada and Utah. Just so you know, Nevada is, I believe, the seventh largest state in the entire country, and this district takes about half of that. So it's
So
about
it's
45.
larger than a lot of states.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
You can fit multiple, Rhode Islands and Connecticut's and Delaware's, and I mean, you can multiple combinations of those states. Like it's
Hmm.
that huge of a place. Most of it, of course, is very rural, and so in physically, but the population is still centered in Reno and Sparks, this
Hmm.
metro area of about 500,000 people. And so it's kind of deceiving in a way. That's I think the first thing I would say is that when you look at the district, it looks like maybe a part of Montana or something where the population density is not huge everywhere. In reality, the most of the population is just one part of the district in the Reno Sparks area, and then the rest is just very sparse. The only
Hmm.
major
Mhm.
small city you would have is Elko, which is a mining town, which is about a couple hours from the border with Nevada and Utah, and so the scale of this, I think, is a really key part of what I think I'm going to talk about because it really is cutting through these urban rural divides that people have long talked about. And I have to say, I've seen it firsthand in the sense that
Hmm.
the way you speak to voters in Fallon, Nevada, which is a lot of farming and around that area, very different than talking to a young professional, 24 years old, maybe just recently graduated from college, working for tech. So that's the challenge that you have to try and show everybody, whether they're from the rurals or from the big cities, that you are their voice, and that in itself was a huge challenge, but very fascinating, and so many lessons learned from that.
Well, I saw too, and I was following your campaign a little bit. You were going all over the state, and you were in a lot of these really, really small towns. You'd go to a town hall, and there were maybe just a handful of people there. Were the issues that the people in the smaller towns and the people in the Reno metro area focused on, or the issues they wanted Congress to actually work on, similar, or were they very different?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Let me tell you something. One of the things that is interesting when you run a congressional campaign is it's not in a vacuum, right? Obviously, that's not the only election or the only primary that people are selecting. You're running alongside candidates for statewide race. So I didn't see the governor, but I saw the lieutenant governor who's running for reelection, running for his pro. Now he was unopposed, so he wasn't a whole lot, because you can kind of take it easy for in that respect. But I saw candidates for treasurer, for secretary of state. You have, of course, local races. So you county
Hmm.
commissioner or
Hmm.
mayor, or district attorney. Then you have, obviously, candidates who are running in the assembly or in the Senate. They have a state in the state legislature. And so you have a lot of races going on at the same time. I think that's a really critical element I want to share with you all is the campaign was very much within the context of how other races were being run as well. So, for example, just to address the question that you're posing, Dave, the issues that really bound people together were generally national or state issues that just had that common thread. And I think the biggest one this time, data centers. That was a
Oh.
huge topic. It was still relatively new, which is really interesting. But that was the only thing that really got people around in different ways, right? Some people were in favors, a lot of were against, or at least there's a lot of nuances there on how people see data centers, but that was one part. So there were certain issues that brought people together. I will say though, and this I think is another important thing. One of the challenges about running for Congress is you have to define the job properly, because
Hmm.
you're going to go to parts of the district. And look, I'm not saying that I don't empathize with some of the infrastructure issues that that occur in certain parts. It is very dire in some of these places. It's shocking. Some places they just want a working sewage plant. That's their critical need, right? And some others want better schools or better roads or this or that. And as someone who interned in Congress a couple times, I've also learned that it's important to be upfront and realistic with people while also recognizing how they're feeling about that issue. And so
Hmm.
the reason why I say that is because the federal government just cannot solve every single problem. And I know that it's going to come to disappointment to a lot of people, but I'm just saying it because that's the Constitution. The Constitution does delegate a lot of powers to the states, and in turn, the local communities also have a lot of responsibility. So on the one hand, you don't want to tell people that you're going to solve every single issue because one, you can't guarantee that. Two, it's probably not constitutional, to just go around and just tell people how to live their lives from DC. And then the other part too is going back to what I said about running alongside other races. It's also important to respect those offices as well and respect the races that were happening there. And so there are times when I wouldn't necessarily know the answer to something, or it could be that I know what that person is saying, but I can't guarantee it from the federal level. And so a common answer, and I think it's a really good answer, is something that I mean, people can use that for whatever they like, but it's to say I'm happy to work with state and local officials on that. I think people want to see cooperation. They want to see a willingness that you respect the boundaries of other offices. Some people are just gonna be like, you got to give me something, and that's just the way it is. But we try to keep it very, very fundamental, keeping with the fundamentals on what the role of a U.S. representative does, and trying to make that connection between D.C., which is a faraway land, no matter where you are in the country. Probably even if you lived in near Dulles Airport, I'm sure D.C. maybe can feel a bit far. But there's always a distance between a constituency and D.C., and the challenge was to try and reassure people that you are the person who can be that bridge between the constituency and DC.
So just to go back to something that we talked about previously, the last time you were on, something you talk about a lot, do you think there's a major issue in America with people not understanding that distinction that you just made between what a representative can do and what a state level official can do?
Hmm.
Did you find that to be an issue where you're trying to hit that message, and maybe there were other people in the campaign who were ignoring or not maybe acknowledging that distinction? Do you think that was maybe an advantage they had where they were just going, yeah, I can do that, and people maybe don't know? People are not aware of that. Do you perceive that as an issue?
Gavin, you raised a really important point. There's something that I saw firsthand that I believe is an issue for both major parties. It's an issue for independents. It's because we are struggling very much, particularly in these times, with the partisanship and the polarization of managing the national issues and national party issues and the local and state party issues. There seems to be a very bad clash going on right now. It's not necessarily new because throughout the course of
Mm,
our country's history, there's always been dissatisfaction with both parties. I mean, just off the top of my head, 1920, Warren Harding was elected. He was not
yeah.
elected because he was absolutely amazing and everyone loved Warren Harding. Oh, well, some ladies liked him because he was handsome and cute. But I don't
That's a
know.
different podcast.
That's a
Yeah,
different
different
podcast.
podcast.
Exactly. I'm not even kidding about that. There was,
Oh no,
the
there
you
were
know.
some scandals that came out,
Yeah,
but
I thought they liked his teapot dome. I mean, that was kind of
that wasn't the ladies.
the.
There certainly were ladies who want to have tea with Mr. Hart, I'm sure. But regardless,
Or I
regardless.
was thinking of even 1912.
Oh yeah, that's right. I
Yeah.
mean, dissatisfaction in that sense, it was dissatisfaction with the Republican Party led by Taft. So that would be the one where Ted Roosevelt runs
But
its
I
third
mean,
party.
even there, the reason Wilson won really was that people didn't think the Democrats would be able to win because they weren't much loved in a lot of the
Mm,
country.
right.
And if you hadn't had Roosevelt's third party, which absolutely ran on that dissatisfaction, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened.
Mm. Yeah.
Anyways,
I think so whether it's 1912 or 1920, right? There's clearly that dissatisfaction with the
yeah.
parties, and it just comes out within the results. And so the challenge here was how do you not only bridge that, but how do you, on the one hand, see how the political wins in the national front go? How do those winds blow? And then how do you communicate that within the voters, right? Because of course, with the primary, every state's got different primaries. So for our state, we
Mm.
have a closed primary. So you have to be a registered Republican to be in the Republican primary, or a registered Democrat to vote in the Democrat primary, which is going to upset a lot of independents. And that's, we can talk, primaries is a whole other subject that for another time. It was definitely a challenge because there were some candidates who were saying things that I would say are not palatable for a general election, but they know that the biggest obstacle to the general election is the primary. And
Mm.
it's understandable that the system, how the primary system operates, will dictate what kinds of people within the party will emerge as big contenders. We certainly had a couple of candidates who really banked on the national side of things and say, "Oh, I support President Trump on this or that," and so there's certainly that could have given them an advantage, and that they leaned on national side of things.
Mm.
But I think you have to walk a fine line, because if you
Yeah.
go too much on the national side, we had an instance where we people were talking about, what what makes you a Northern Nevadan, and the reason why I say that is because there were some people who were relatively new, like myself and my family. Like we've been here for a few years. Some people have been here
Mm.
for multiple generations,
Yeah.
and there might be an advantage in that sense for those folks who, particularly in the rules where there is more of that multi-generational side. And so I'm not saying that in of itself should be disqualified or anything like that, but I do think that it was at times disappointing to hear that in the year 2026 we have to have communities built on ideas. We can't have
Mm.
this
Hmm.
back and forth between, when did you come here and this or that. It's not the America that I understand, at least the values that we put forth. And so I really try to emphasize, we try to emphasize the fact that we want this district to, in many ways, reflect the values of our our nation, and that about reflecting on, values of civility, right, of a sense of belonging, but a sense of belonging not based on what generation how
Mm.
many generations you've been here, because you can't control that. I mean, I didn't control what hospital I was born in when I when I was born in 1997, right? Neither
Yeah.
Dave. Did you have any control? Gavin, did you have any to decide on
Yeah, I'm
decision
pretty
on that?
sure I got to say on that. No, I mean it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's
the whole thing
Only
was
just
planned
Gavin.
silly.
from before I was born. I made that whole thing.
Right. So
Well, you
we
are
don't.
very competent, Dave. I'd believe that.
Not even close.
So we don't have any control where we're born at, but we can control where we're going, and that
Hmm.
is a really big takeaway message. And it certainly takes some time to build that traction in a campaign and across a lot of different voters, especially if this is the first time you're running. But we were really confident in our just the processes that we took, and the mannerisms in which we heard from people, talked to people. I feel like it's best to run a campaign with good principles and values, and to focus on those, because there's always going to be another election. There's always going to be another opportunity to, and people will constantly test you. Like, it doesn't matter if you're on the younger side of things, or if you're on the older side of things. It doesn't matter. You're young, old, middle aged, whatever. People will constantly test and see where you stand and how you respond to those tests.
Hmm.
And going back to what you were saying earlier about Coach Saban, the way I saw that you were running your campaign, you were running it step by step, play by play. And, if you had a showing somewhere, you didn't let that impact you at another part of your campaign. You go to one city, you'd have a town hall, you'd go to another town hall. Okay, you do an appearance in front of, forgot the news channel in Reno, but you talk to somebody over there. And the whole entire time you were running, you had something happen in a smaller town. You didn't let that actually hit you down. you got back up and you kept going. And I think for a lot of people in rural Nevada, they go, okay, I've been here for 4 or 5 generations. And my family have pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. That is something that local politicians and national politicians need. They need to have the ability to pull themselves up and go, yeah, I can't sit down and go, okay, this, didn't really work out for me. I think, they should look at that and go, okay, what are the values, and something that you touched on, the values that we as Northern Nevadans have, what can we find in a local, elected official or a national elected official that have these same values, and look at those shared areas instead of going, okay, I've been here for 100 years, you've been here for 15 years, or you've been here for 20 years. And I think that's what the country really needs.
And to
I
pick up
mean,
on
is
that
we have
point,
these shared values together. Mm-hmm.
yeah, to pick up on that point, was the commonality that I would find as someone who moved here in 2022 compared to someone whose family's been here since the 1870s. Something that I think is maybe just not articulated a lot in the larger political atmosphere is that individual, myself, we're definitely concerned about people who come here to Nevada and they just try to make it, in terms of politics, try to make it a state that we don't recognize, right? And in this case, we understand that people are always coming here, and I guess I always try to, again, try to figure out where they're coming from on that perspective. And I think something that that person I can agree on is that there are some people who come here and they buy up a house in Reno, and look, they have the finances to maybe buy multiple homes and all that, but they don't actually live here. It's like a vacation home and this and that. So if you multiply that by X number of times, is that some people will say, maybe that's a bit of an issue. Maybe I don't know. I'm not saying there's a solution. I'm just saying that there are times when you can find those commonalities. But I see why you're concerned about people moving here and not trying to be part of the community, or not or coming here and the politics that they're bringing is just the same politics from the state that they just ran away from. And so why are they trying to impose that here in Nevada? And I won't say specifically what parties we're talking about here, but I'm just saying that when you have
I can think of
California right on
multiple
the other
parties in
side,
multiple states. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I can think of, and it goes, I mean, yeah, it goes in a lot of different directions, man. But yeah, it's an issue, and I think you can hear about it in a lot of different states and a lot of different contexts. But I'm sure that was a big thread of the campaign.
it was the I will say that the other side of it too is I was very pleased to meet so many people who also had those stories about coming from California or another state. Some people come from other countries moving here.
Hmm.
One of our good friends, she's from France, or her husband's from Switzerland, and they live just south of Carson. So
Wow.
there's a lot of these other people too, right? I go back to what we envisioned for the district, which is we truly have quite a few different kinds of people moving from all over, and it's that melting pot element that we were trying to get at with this campaign, which is to say it doesn't matter whatever your story is, you get to tell that story. You get to be in a place where you can have economic opportunities, and it's not just going to be in one sector only. That's something that is part of the reality of 2026, which is we're in a very competitive world. I also tell people that along the campaign trail, in town halls and other events, that we have to be much more competitive as a district. I'm not saying that we have to go and put down Las Vegas, because people here love to do that, and this is part of it's kind of a fun way, because if you're in a state and you got a state that's dominated by one city, the rest of the state, of course, is going to, in serious ways and in fun ways, kind of poke fun at the big city. So there is
Yeah.
that. I do think that, going back to the role of the U.S. representative, you have to represent the state in a lot of ways, right? Even though you're coming from that district, but you are part of a delegation, right? You are working alongside fellow members of Congress from Las Vegas and the two senators, and so there is that united front you have to put out there. Now it's a bit different for a primary, in part because of the fact that this is the only Republican leaning seat. So in Republican primary, right, people are going to be a bit more skeptical if you talk about working with Democrats and all that, even though we have had candidates who, like, including myself, who say, well, we're happy to work with Democrats. I think this is just a natural part of politicking. But it does go back to the idea of leadership, right? And we have a vision for the districts that you want to represent. And that's what we've tried to do, is to say we are trying to look forward. So what people have a lot of different grievances about what happened in the past few years. I don't think that is beneficial for the next generation. The next generation wants to see what is it that we are going to do next for our constituents. Those are the most important things there. Dave, I'm calling on you.
Mm-hmm.
The professor
Yeah.
me is
yeah. Yeah.
I was waiting for Dave to say something, and he didn't say anything.
I was
Mexican standoff.
No, I was thinking about something, and I was like, oh, Gavin's probably going to jump in, so I'm going to sit back and wait for a second.
Well, what do you think all the nodding was about?
I don't know. I think you're just sitting there and like kind of waving your head back and forth,
zoning out. No,
looks like half the people in my master's classes. No.
Can I share something?
Maybe more than half.
Please, you guys something there. I want to just highlight something. So we had a town hall in a small town called Lovelock, which is a town of 2,000 people, and the town hall was organized by, I think, the Lions Club, and a very, very good gentleman there. And I have to say, I mean, there's a lot of different events and all that, but we had a few hundred people there, which was really incredible turnout. Now, I'm sure some of them might have come from Winnemucca, which is down the road about an hour away from there and all. But I just highlight how there were times when some of these local and rural areas really did a good job with turnout. And I appreciate that, because that is how the civic process should occur, right? I'm not just saying that the more people you have at a town hall, therefore the better democracy is. I don't think you can necessarily make that direct correlation. But I do think that when you have certain venues that have done a very solid job, and that's not the only one. We've had some other ones where the turnout was quite good for certain localities. I want to give a shout out to the people who help organize these events. That, I think, is another thing too of the campaign, which is you really appreciate how a number of these people running certain organizations, including chambers of commerce too, who organize these events and giving people, giving candidates the opportunity to speak with their members. I just appreciate that aspect, and there's some times where you do have to pay some amount to go and talk to voters all, but we were quite willing to do that generally, because we do think that this is, again, that opportunity to share our vision and share our campaign. And so I just want to, again, shout out to some really good people who worked behind the scenes to make these events happen, and to the people who came to have an open mind and truly consider all the candidates there.
I think right now there is a lot of talk, and not just in the US, but in a lot of countries, about the sort of death of political engagement. And it is heartening, because not just you, but other people I know who are politically involved, either as organizers or candidates, that just doesn't seem to be the case. And I think there is a narrative that people have where they go, people are just not interested in the issues, people aren't showing up. Well, I think it depends on who you're talking to and where you're going. And if you don't go to the people, you're not going to know about this. If you don't go to Lovelock, Nevada, to the Lions Club, you're probably not going to hear about it. But that doesn't mean that sort of thing's not going on. And it is heartening to hear, because that's a commitment. What you were describing, people potentially driving up to an hour to go and sit and listen and let you know how they felt about things. And when things are working well, that seems to me to be a model of how things should work, at least on some level. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents. Dave?
Yeah, and I was going to jump in and tying together what both you guys were saying. Sherman, did you see most of the people at some of these events, were they older or younger? So you were saying Northern Nevada's changed demographically. You have a lot of people coming in, maybe they're getting a second house. I would imagine those people are younger. Are those people politically involved with the future of Northern Nevada? And, are they essentially putting skin in the game to go, okay, I want to go out and see what these people that are going to be representing me, see what they have to offer and help our district and help the people in our state? Or are they just kind of sitting back and it's more older voters, that have been there for generations and saying, okay, we've been here for generations, you know, we need to essentially keep holding the torch, and these newcomers really don't care that much. I mean, what was your feel in terms of the people that were coming out to these events?
Well, for many of the primary voters, they do generally tend to be older.
Mm.
Even I think on the Democrat side, I would imagine that you have a number of older voters, probably more younger voters over on the Democrat side than on the Republican side for sure. But we did have a lot of older voters, and so it did a couple things. First, of course, is that definitely on some of the issues regarding, for example, health care and all, those are going to be more salient in certain parts
Yeah.
of the district,
Hmm.
right? And certainly that in itself is a challenge when you have local communities, we have rural communities that barely have some working bureaucracies or offices, whether it's Social Security or even just medical facilities, or
Mm.
even just the people. We had a huge lack of people. We can talk about that in a second, but definitely it definitely changed the element of what issues were more important than others. I will say though that age is only a barrier if we make it a barrier, in the sense that I do think the way that we campaign and we do primaries, I hope that it evolves to cater to a number of different party voters, particularly for younger voters. And
Mm.
certainly when you're campaigning, right, you have to stick with your selling points. And of course, in this case, I was the youngest candidate in the Republican primary. There was actually another woman in the Democrat primary who was actually a couple years younger than me, which is interesting. And so she ran over there. I didn't get a chance to meet her, but I was the youngest in the Republican field. I've come to learn that it very I wouldn't say it's a balancing act, but I do believe that we do have to find new ways to get younger people to get involved, and
Mm.
I don't think it has to be at the expense of older voters. I just think that there can be a much more dynamic conversation about a lot of issues, and certainly if you talk to any political party, they want more members. They want more younger people. That younger people is just that really strange age group, because they can talk a lot about a lot of things on social media, but when it comes to turnout and all that, they're generally on the lower end of things. So it's a challenge that each party has, but I'm glad that I had the opportunity to hear from a number of older voters, and it's particularly when the issues came to some of the cultural issues. I'm not one to want to engage in a lot of cultural issues, at least just because I don't think there's a lot of federal policies that can directly or like instantaneously solve an issue, because that's the issue with culture wars, is that people want an instant answer that can erase an issue completely, and that's not going to be the case. It's going to be a combination of
Yeah.
policy and other societal cultural factors.
Which you
But it
can't
was
really legislate.
right, exactly. And so you're hearing from older voters, just hearing about, for example, their experiences during the Reagan administration, right? That was really interesting, right, to hear how they can offer some kind of perspective on things, because as much as tough as it is with the cost of living, with what's happening overseas and what's happening in DC, everywhere, there are times when we do have to take a step back as young people and say, are we saying that it is the worst times because of the fact that we're kind of in the fog of war, right? We're kind of in this era of uncertainty, when there have been many times in the past where people, I would argue, have had it a lot tougher, especially when without the technology that we have nowadays, right? Without the economic mobility that we have nowadays. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I will say that part of engaging with older voters, getting some perspective that I can't
Mm.
offer, that I think is a
Mm.
big part of our campaign, which is making that sure that no matter what your demographics are, especially in terms of age, because age, of course, has been a huge issue. We certainly don't want an age group to dominate politics. Right? That's never good. And it doesn't matter what age group, really. You have to have a broad tent. I believe that broad tent is really where we can get a lot of things done. But just interacting with these voters really gave me those perspectives, and it gave me an opportunity to make them feel part of the process, because there are a lot of people who do feel like things have gone in the wrong direction in the last several decades and over the last several years, and people want some reassurance, and they want to hear directly from you that if you are elected, whether it's this time or it could be another time, that you are keeping in mind what they have to say and what they truly feel about the state of their district or the state of their country. That, I think, is a very profound thing. It's something that we didn't want to take for granted, because this, as you were alluding to, Dave and Gavin, there are people who do travel long distances and are taking time out of their lives to hear from you. And sometimes it might feel like they don't have to, but they want to. I think people are curious about what can come next and the new things that can come in our politics.
Yeah, I mean, they want their voices heard, and like, regardless of whether they live in a big city or they live out, on a ranch somewhere, they should have their voices heard. They deserve it as American citizens.
That's right. That's right. And we owe it to our fellow citizens to have good qualities. I go back to, Gavin, what you talked about with the state of things, how people feel disconnected and all from the politics in terms of engagement. I go back to a fundamental virtue that this experience really forces upon you, at least it forces upon me, and that is a sense of humility, knowing that you can't know everything. You can't know every single corner of town X or town ABC. You can't know everything, and I do think that we have generally either lost that, or we think that, or we attack that as we're literally attacking humility as a virtue, and that, I think, is not a good thing. There's people run around thinking that they know everything, they can solve all your issues, they tell you that we're gonna just change grocery prices overnight. They tell you that, oh, we're just gonna make sure that this foreign country is not going to just we're just going to turn them into a paradise of some kind, or they'll that kind of thing, or we're gonna just, all we got to do is just hold hands and say kumbaya, we're all going to be just fine. Those,
Well, I mean,
that's,
there's some virtues to that as well, but I understand what you're saying in that I think people, you were talking about, we're in a period where maybe things aren't as bad as they've ever been, but we're in a period of such mobility and such change that people really are disoriented, and they're really attracted to what I think you're talking about, which is, here's an easy answer. We're going to do this. You're going to be happy with this. We're going to do X. You're going to get Y. And the way the world works, that doesn't always happen. And I think it forces out people who are maybe offering a more complicated, well, we have to try. We have to engage in the process. We have to see what's going to happen. And that's a hard product to sell right now, because people want, I think this has been a big theme of what you've been talking about today. People want security. People want to be told, one, your concern's valid. Two, I'm hearing you. And three, I can do something about it. Well, sometimes you can do one or two, but three might be, well, that's not even in my job description. I can talk about three and I can work on three with someone else, but I can't overnight go in and change this thing. And I think that's probably more of a feature than a bug in the political system as it stands now.
Gavin, what you said makes a lot of sense, right? People want those instantaneous solutions. I will say there's a very big difference, and this is, I think, going back to that virtue of humility. There's a difference between someone saying, "I will change this for you," versus "We will change this," and it's that change from I to we, and it's something that when you run a campaign, when you do anything, you realize that it's not just you. It's you and
Yeah.
all the people who support you. It's people like you guys who when I told you about the idea of running for Congress when we met in College Station just a
Mhm.
few months ago, when it's all those people, both of you, right, and all the friends and the family I've got. It's all the people who are part of you, and so it does make you reflect on that fact that you need to be the person to say, not you're not going to go out and say I alone will do this and that. I do think that even though people want that instantaneous solution, I do think that people generally will know that there is at least one other person whom you have to work with who might not necessarily
Yeah.
share your vision.
Mhm.
And so that I just emphasize that emphasis of we. So I think you're right, Gavin, is that there are people who are looking for those instant things, and that's just going to be the way it is. It's been the case since the founding of our country. People wanted,
Yeah.
just independence and a perfect constitution, right? Right in on July 5th, 1776, and people were like, we first of all we got to win a war, but second of all, we got a lot of other
The
work to
Whiskey
do,
Revolt. I mean,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Articles of
There
If
are a
the
few
Confederation were a
Articles
bumps
of
in the
failure,
road.
yeah.
Confederation were
Yeah.
so good, we'd still have them, right?
Right. So yeah, some people, our founders had to redo their homework, right? So
Mm.
there's clearly a lot of that needs to happen to materialize things. But I go back to another fundamental thing, which is institutions. We
Mm.
have a fundamental decay in a lot of our institutions, within our political parties, within government, within education, and standing on the principles of institutions, I think, is a good way to do things, because what you're saying is you're not just there to just say, okay, I'm just gonna run for office and that's all I care about, right? In the sense that, oh, it's my office. It's not your office. It's the office of the American people, and you have
Mm.
to be part of a continuity element, right? Where you're not just called to serve for maybe just this one particular office. You're called to serve. And Dave, as you will know, right, in the Bush School, right, when public service is a noble calling, not calling for a particular office. It's a noble calling in general, right? It's a there are so many ways to serve, and that I think is another key thing. Is when you're running in a primary, you know that the results are not necessarily going to be in your favor, and so you have to give that again those reassurances that you are part of an institution and part of norms. And I do think that something I want to share with you all is, when the results came out, it was a very bitter primary for a couple of the candidates,
Mm.
between the candidate who
Mhm.
won and the candidate who came in second place. So the winner was David Flippo. The James Sotomayor came in second. I got to know both of them. I got to know actually she got to know a lot of the candidates there, and I decided that as someone who believes in the process of having a democratic system, right? Part of the democratic system, it's not just the winning part; it's how well do you lose in that sense. And I say that in a
Mm.
strange way, but it's like
Mhm.
how do you accept the results that don't come in your favor, while also giving people some element of confidence in the system. And so I decided to write to Mr. Flippo and congratulate him. I certainly have my differences of opinion on certain things or on certain mannerisms, but I believe it was the right thing to do, because the Republican voters had an opportunity to pick their candidate and they picked him. And it's important to respect that opinion and to ensure that people need to have that sense that, okay, this is not just going to be some sore loser circus, because we've seen
Mm.
too much of that on both sides, and maybe more on one side, depending on how you lean. But it's just something that I'm very disturbed by when I see a lot of sore losers, because unless you're providing some evidence that that it could have altered the result, you should not be going out there telling people that you're a sore loser and that you deserve everything in the world. No, you're not. You don't. And so I think it's part of something that we always believe throughout the campaign, which is we really tried to build as many bridges as we could. I got to
Mm.
know people in even local races. The fact that we just go through local races as if they're like a minor league baseball team is crazy. It is not a minor league, major league baseball team situation. It's a major league in every part of our federalist system. And so
Yeah.
I do think
Yeah.
that there was a huge element to building those bridges, building those connections with all kinds of candidates, all kinds of people involved in the process. And I believe that was a big part of why we decided it's important to tell the winner of that election, say, I respect the vote and I appreciate the conversations we had, and best of luck to you. That I think is the right thing to do, and we need to uphold these norms throughout our elections.
I'm
Couldn't
with
agree
you.
with
And I
that
think
more.
on that same note, you brought up it's the major league for the people that live in those smaller towns. It's the major league
Yeah.
because this is really their only big chance to get, a little bit of the spotlight on the national stage.
To
That's
get
right.
attention, which
Yeah.
again, I think speaks to a larger problem in the system where, the things you said about rural neglect. I mean, these are major issues. This isn't something that should come up, every 2 years when there's a primary. This is something that's, I would imagine, of existential concern for a lot of your voters. Yeah, I'm glad you were talking about that, and I'm glad you got the opportunity to talk to those people and hopefully build something for the future.
Education is really going to be how
Hmm.
we improve our societies. And I say education in the sense of our schools, but not just the physical buildings, not just having better quality school buildings. I think it's about what does education look like for career paths for a number of different individuals. Some people are very gifted on being electricians, and we
Mhm.
need
Hmm.
to reward them for that. We need to tell them, say, you have a value in our society. For someone who wants to be a professor at a university, we should have an education system that prepares them to the best of their ability to become the best professor they possibly can. So it starts from these virtues too. I do think that on education, there are a number of communities that really have told me to say we're struggling with our school system. Right? It's hard to even get people, and I go back to that, which is education really is a pipeline for every profession if you think about it.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
if you don't have enough people, you can have as many buildings as you want. You can. There's some people who say, "Hey, in this rural part of the country, I'm glad that they've built a fire station. I'm glad that they built this. Who's going to run that? Who's going to be the firefighter? Who's going to be the paramedic? Who's going to be the teacher? And who's going to be the construction worker?" And those are the things that we've also lacked, I think, generally. Maybe not just here in the second district of Nevada. It's probably a recurring issue across the country, but we do have to think about that. We have to think, how do we meet those demands for all kinds of professions and not try and push people to only pursue 4-year bachelor's degrees or just put people through trades. It's about giving people, especially early on, giving those young people those options of, and really
Hmm.
making them feel like you can be part of a society in a lot of different ways. And that, I think, could really lift the tide for urban and rural areas. Is if you have greater education, certainly certain parts have much more of a need for that in terms of improving their education system. But that, I think, is going to be very key. It is about teaching students how to fish and how to fish in a very competitive society.
I'm with you. I mean, not here to just sit here and go, yeah, I agree, I agree, I agree. But really, I think that's something that's missing in our education system, and it's been missing in our education system for the last 30 to 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we could keep talking about this all day, but
We
we're
could.
pushing we're
We
pushing
really
almost
could.
an hour
Yeah.
on this. And
And this has been
Sherman, you
just
left
a
us,
fantastic conversation. But
yeah,
go ahead, Dave.
you left us tons of food for thought and a future episode again on some of these topics and
A
more
couple,
about rural
probably.
Nevada. And yeah, I think at least more than one.
Well, I just want to say, if I may, I'll just wrap up. There was a time when during the campaign you're grinding through. I mean, it is it's difficult, but imagine governing. That's what I was thinking too. I was like, boy, if I'm thinking campaigning is hard, imagine governing, right? And
Yeah.
so and so there were those lighthearted moments. I remember those times just joking with some of these candidates about all kinds of things and just the small talk. There's so much about it, and I'm really glad I've had this opportunity to speak to both of you on your show about the campaign. I always say there's so much more than just a campaign. I've gotten to not only get build new connections and earn new friends, new friendships, but it it really is very much on how you do things. And there's more to come in the next few weeks or so. But I've already gotten opportunities to help with a couple campaigns, to help with some of the party stuff here in the local area in Carson, and it's that's just the way. I think that's the way we should be doing things, which is really to offer ourselves to help others and to ensure that people are always going to be first in your mind, and know that no matter how tough things can be, there's always going to be someone who is in more difficult circumstances, and I think that should give us pause and to think
Hmm.
about what it is that we have in our lives, and that I think is such a key pillar of not just this campaign, but hopefully for a lot of things that I get to partake in. Again, I just want to emphasize again how much of this campaign was because of other people who've given me the opportunity to hear from them, and that is such a big part of our civics. And if I hope we don't lose that. In fact, I hope we strengthen that. And I'm sure there are
Hmm.
ways that we can all come together to strengthen those pillars so that other people and other generations in the future can have those opportunities, probably better opportunities than we have today. And that is my hope, no matter how things go in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Sherman. Again, we always appreciate having you on. And yeah, if you have liked this episode, like to hear more about this, please like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family. Please leave us a star review on the platform of your choice. And you'll be hearing from us soon again here on the Fringe. Anything you want to add, Dave?
Yeah, I would also like to add that Sherman has a podcast called Friends and Fellow Citizens. And if you enjoyed Sherman's take and his philosophy, he talks a lot more about this, and he has very interesting interviews as well. So we'll put a link to Friends and Fellow Citizens in the pod as well. Anything, Sherman, before we go? You get the last word.
I just want to thank Dave and Gavin again for having me. So great to share with you all, and let's make sure to keep this American experiment going for many years to come.
Awesome. Okay, Dave, you know what time it
Hmm.
is now?
Yeah, unfortunately. Unfortunately.
Let's hit that button.
All right, here we go. Gavin, I can't do it. I don't want to.
Oh my God, just hit the damn